Wonderful. Thank you, Howard. These were the two we were going to sing, but we can do a different one if you'd like.
Trade places so my slippers aren't on the camera.
I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. I sing the wisdom that ordained the sun to rule the day. The moon shines full at his command, and all the stars obey. I sing the goodness of the Lord that filled the earth with food. He formed the creatures with his word and then pronounced them good. Lord, how thy wonders are displayed where'er I turn my eye. If I survey the ground I tread, or gaze upon the sky, there's not a plant or flower below, but makes thy glories known. And clouds arise and tempests blow by order of thy throne. Creatures that borrow life from thee are subject to thy care. There's not a place where we can flee, but God is present there. Amen. Praise the Lord. We'll turn to 529, Under His Wings. Under his wings I am safely abiding.
Hello, everybody. It's been a great Sabbath. We've been blessed with Jerry and Linda. I was going to say that. My mind went blank for a second. Thank you so glad that we came here. You came here. We've been blessed by you, by your ministry, by your story. I said in a sermon two Sabbaths ago that Harold's trying to get my attention. I don't know why, but pardon? Can you hear me better now? Okay. Yeah, well, no, I'm getting to that. No problem. But I was about the story thing. I was a couple Sabbaths ago. I did the sermon and the last part of my sermon talked about how everyone's got a story and to be thankful to have a story so that we can tell each other and share with each other. And we're blessed by your stories today. Before I do the prayer to close the Sabbath, what I'd like to do is after the prayer, I would like to get Harold and Mark to come up and collect an offering for them. They came out here under their own admonition. They of their own free will. There have been expenses that have incurred for coming up there, and we'd like to show our appreciation for that. And if you could, out of the kindness of your heart, please provide them with an offering. But before we do that, I would like to just pray. May I get down on your knees if that's possible. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for another beautiful Sabbath, for bringing us to this church. We thank you for this church. We thank you for all the blessings that you presented to us here, and for having the Holy Spirit with us throughout each and every Sabbath, and especially this Sabbath. And Lord, we thank you for all the messages you provide us today, for the stories, the inspirational stories, and for giving us some idea on where we need to go and what we need to do to prepare ourselves for the coming days. Lord, there's another set of stories that are coming up this evening. Please give Jerry the ability and Linda to be able to convey them to each other and let it give us an impact. The statements be impactful so that we are awakened by what we need to do. And Lord, please make it so that the offerings that will be given there will look after them. And Lord, we just thank you again for being here and loving us. And we just want to say that we love you with all our hearts. We thank you for your plan for each and every one of us. And we want to be with you for forever and ever. Amen. So Harold and Mark could come up and yes, Marlene.
It's been brought to my attention that not everybody is carrying hats.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if everyone heard that, but another option to provide offering to them is to do an e-transfer and maybe have it. So I'll give you an email address if that's okay, Marlene. To marleneworks@hotmail.com. And somehow that's memorized in my head now for Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, we will make it so that as a tax receipt as well. Perfect. Okay. And is there anything else? We're all done? So we'd like to welcome Jerry and Linda one more time to present their story. And I know you've got a zillion pictures from my understanding, and we look forward to seeing your place. From what we've gathered so far, it looks like it's a beautiful, beautiful place that we'd love to have something like that one day as well. So it's all yours.
Is this on for everybody? Okay. Thank you so much, all of you, for staying by this evening. I know it's a long day for everybody. I want to go through these quickly because I don't want to waste your time, but if you see something, I'd really like to know more about that greenhouse thing or the hydropower or whatever, just give me a signal and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but I don't want to waste time where you don't really have the interest.
Another technical problem? No. Oh,
Technology,
they just got unplugged somehow.
technology is always like that.
Can't do anything without power. Well, at least not here. Living naturally. Maybe I'll turn some lights off.
It's just heating up.
Is it?
I think it's coming. You could turn some lights off, the background lights.
Lights on now. Way back here on? That's good. Perfect, okay.
You want to center it up a little bit, or is that good? Okay. As in the bulletin, we call our little seminar "Living Naturally," and I think it's important to live in harmony with God's great nature. So anyway, that's why I just see if this works here. That picture is taken near the road going down to our place. The hill is going down over the edge. Anyway, most of the mountains are in Glacier National Park, and I just wanted you to see what our valley looks like. As you can see, there's not a lot of man-made structures there. So the resources are all there for you. Of course, in Glacier, you can't take resources, but you can certainly, that's where we do our hiking and all that. This picture is taken from the top of our hill. That's the front yard of Ted and Rochelle's home. And that's taken in the fall. You're all familiar with larch. We have beautiful larch trees there. And they have a beautiful color in the fall.
Rochelle's your daughter?
Yes, Rochelle is our daughter and husband. Yeah. They live on top of the hill. We live about a third of the way up the hill. The reason we live where we do, I'll show you in a minute, is because there's springs that come out not quite halfway up, and we're below the springs, so we have gravity-fed water. And I'll show you, they also have a non-electric pump that pumps their water clear up for them as well. That's the same place, but without the snow. That's kind of early fall, late summer. And there's a river below. We specifically chose not to buy the water, the land on the water, because it was more expensive, and you can't really use the river. I mean, we don't fish, but we reserved an easement. So we have a roaded easement that goes, it's just a quarter mile from the edge of our property on down. And our friends, I talked about Paul that helped me with he owns that property. That family owns the property in front of us. But the road ends here, so you can put your canoe in, your raft or whatever. And it's good to have good recreational possibilities for your family. That's what our road looks like. It's 40 miles to the nearest town. It's a good gravel road, but it can get washboardy. It's gravel. There's probably about a third of it is paved. As you get closer to town, there's some and a little other. That's the metropolis of Polbridge. That's about 6 miles south of our place, and that is Polbridge. It's an original store. It's over 100 years old that the pioneers used when they first came, and it's still in operation, but only in the warm months. They close it in the winter. Called the Polbridge Mercantile. This picture is older, and do you see the barrel there to the left? Okay, that was the original barrel that we could make phone calls in. That's the most people you'll ever see in Polbridge. That's 4th of July homespun Valley Parade. And the guy running the mules there was a friend of ours. He lived close by. But a bunch of people show up because it's one of the few parades around that's not commercialized. I mean, it's just all the people do their own floats and all that sort of stuff. That shows you the sign, Columbia Falls, 41 miles. That is where the road, the main road, that's our mailbox there, that barrel. And the main road's right in the foreground, and right behind it, the driveway heads down to our place. We're about a mile off the main road. The county does plow the main road some of the time, but we're responsible for the mile that goes all the way down. And we're the only ones that live down there full time. We have neighbors, there's maybe 10 other landowners along that road that have a weekend cabin or something like that. Oh, by the way, you saw Canada there. 16 miles to the border. So that's why I said we're neighbors. This is at the bottom of the hill in the summer, and that is Chloe on the left and Misty. There are 2 dogs. Misty is Ted and Rochelle's dog, and Chloe is ours, and they were sisters in the same litter. And unfortunately, they're almost 13 years old now. And they usually only live 11 or 12 years, but they are still going strong. They like the mountain life. That's where you drive in to, we have a circle drive and a fountain. And the fountain's there for 2 reasons. Part is just to be beautiful. We're trying to make the place in the wilderness not just functional, but beautiful if possible. But it's all spring water. There's no pumps. It's not recirculated. You can drink it. The dogs drink out of the bottom one. I try to drink out of the top one, unless they haven't been there for a while, because that one spring runs like 10,000 gallons a day. And it just overflows and goes over and soaks in the ground. What looks like a house isn't a house. That was actually our winter greenhouse, and it was our classroom. I'll show you inside. It was a garden classroom when we had our small academy, and that we keep going 12 months out of the year. We overwinter our flowers and all that. The other building to the left is an orchard greenhouse, because it's very difficult to grow fruit trees reliably there. But in there, they never get frost on the blossoms and all of that. Okay, we had the school for 35 years.
And you stopped then?
We stopped in 2015, was our last graduation.
35 years.
Yeah. That's Chloe and Misty again, and that's the circle drive with flowers. You know, you don't have to put flowers around your place, but they sure do add a lot of beauty. But if it wasn't for the fact that we have the greenhouse and solarium, we figure we raise about $2,000 worth of flowers if we had to buy them. And that stacks up after a while. Rochelle and Ted have big hanging pots of flowers around their home, and it comes from the greenhouse. And they can be overwintered there. What looks fuzz in the background is a sprinkler, because we have to water all that, and all comes from our gravity-fed springs. Otherwise, I'd go broke paying for water and pumps and all the rest, too. That's a little closer. That's looking up. That's our home up the hill a little ways. And we look down, so we can kind of look down, see the fountain and the circle drive and out to our garden and then off to the mountains. This is the road going up to our place, and it can cost you a lot to have roads put in. We have about a mile of roads on our own place, but they cost very little. And the secret to that is you decide where the road goes. Before you get a guy in there with a machine, you go in and cut all the trees, So he doesn't have, because otherwise they'll just push them over and shove them in the woods, and you got roots and stumps, and we saw that really quick. So we cleaned it all up. All the trees that were big enough became saw logs. The smaller ones were firewood. And then after that, the brush we piled on the downhill side, and it acted like rebar so you don't have rocks running all down the road. And you end up with a pretty good series of roads. That's the road as it comes to a circle drive by our home. These are tamarack. We have, fortunately, no one ever logged this property on the hillside. So we have old growth timber there. You'll see later we have some that are 500 years old. And if you can find property that has old growth timber, you can't grow it in your lifetime. That's the front of the house. The little gray piece of plywood in the front, what that is, you take that off, and that's a poured concrete slanting slide chute that goes down and comes out in our furnace room under the living room. So when we want to put firewood, you don't have to drag it through the house. You come there with a wheelbarrow load of wood, throw it down there. Linda stacks it, I throw it down, and it keeps the wood mess out of the house. But it makes really good, easy access. This is the kitchen side of the house, and the reason I show this is all the stone came from the local mountains. It's free. You get a permit, but you can get all you want. The rule is you can't use a machine. They don't want you going in with a big excavator. You have to move it by hand. Excuse me. Also notice the bark there. That all came from the forest around us. Where they do logging, sometimes it kind of rubs the bark on the ground. You can go in there and just get wheelbarrow loads of it for nothing. And then another thing that's really important is that little doorway. You see a little screen there? That is a vent that goes down under our foundation and into our root cellar. Because if you're going to truly grow your own food and store food from one harvest to another, you need a really good, well-functioning root cellar. And I'll show you how it works below, but that's where it starts, the north side of the house. That's going up to the front door. And unless you think it's summer in paradise all the time, this is the same place in the winter. And that's Chloe. You can see how deep the snow can get. It isn't always that deep, but it can certainly get that way. That's a pathway. It's hard to tell because of the snow, the definition. This one's easier. That's two of our former students. That's after some of the snow had slid off the roof, so it was more than normal. But, you know, if you don't like snow, you're not going to like it in the mountains. We love snow. We love the winter because we have guilt-free time to just sit in front of the fireplace and read. Because when it's nice out, you really should be getting firewood, right? That's inside the house, and you can see down to the fountain and beyond to the garden below, and the mountain. The mountains are kind of indistinct in the picture. You can see them there.
Did you build that?
Yes, we drew the plans ourselves, and then we built all of it without hiring anything done. Now, we did get help from some of our neighbors, and we helped them, some too. That's the best networking you can do. And I'll show you some pictures of that when we were building. And when our students were there, they were some help, although they didn't do finish work, but they helped with most of the concrete was done in the summer when they weren't there. They helped dig the basement. It's a partial basement. And that would have cost us thousands of dollars just to have somebody dig it. Where would we have put the stuff? It would just made a gravel pit out of the front yard, and we didn't want to do that. Excuse me. Anyway, we tried to make our home so it feels almost like you're outside when you're inside. You can see the difference there. Yeah. That's Rochelle, our daughter. That picture was probably taken 5 years ago or so. Ted, we have a better picture later. Little Curtis is in his lap. This is a Sabbath. This is what typical Sabbath is in our valley. We have it at all our different houses. We kind of go around to the houses. And this is after we've had our church service and Sabbath school. Dogs are allowed in our church. And then we have potluck afterwards.
So the stone you talked about earlier, where you got your stone.
Yes, the fireplace there, all of that stone came from the same place the other did. like I was saying, if you go to where there aren't a lot of people, the resources are absolutely abundant, at least where we are in Montana. You don't even have to pay for the permit. They want you to get one so they know where you're going. But you can get all that. I mean, to buy all that stone would have been a small fortune. They do sell stone in town. And by the way, Linda laid all that stone. She is a much better mason than I am. We learned, I should really show you some of her first stone work, but I won't. And then Rochelle learned from her, because she laid stone too, and she became an even better mason. I'll show you her work. And to have a fireplace like that built for you would cost, well, we had a neighbor that went up, and this was years and years ago, it was $30,000 just for the concrete and mason work. But that probably cost us less than $1,000. I'd have to figure it out, maybe a little more than that for the concrete and the mortar. And the purpose of notice the fireplace is entirely inside the house, because in cold country like we are, you want to have a home that has massive amounts of thermal mass, which is concrete, stone, and so on, that's insulated away from the ground and the outside. That thing has about weighs over 30,000 pounds. And the floor that you see, it has carpet, that's actually a concrete ceiling over our furnace room below. So you don't see any wood stove. It's downstairs. And the stove heats that floor. I'll talk about that a little more. And you can see into Linda's kitchen there. And I'll let her talk a little bit about her wood cook stove. This button right there if you want to.
Okay, yeah, this is Sabbath potluck, getting everybody's dishes, whatever, the oven, I don't know if it's full too, but things on top. And like we mentioned, when we had students there, I would do the cooking, of course, with the help of the kids. And it wasn't just the girls that helped, the boys helped too. Set the record straight, and because the girls like to get out too and not just be confined to the kitchen. And since I like that too, I thought it was only fair that we mix it up a little bit. But anyway, yes, I guess I love a wood cook stove. I have used it since we moved to Montana. How many years ago? 40 years ago. Whoa. It's so easy to start. We have this special diesel mixed with sawdust to use as we call it fire starter. And you just lay your logs in there, your little logs or split kindling, whatever, and throw a little bit. It doesn't take much, probably maybe 3 tablespoons full. I'll have a little scoop in and throw a match in, and voila, it's burning. And then you just add a little other stuff on top to get it going, and you've got a fire. And then you just add more large logs on it as you need. So also you can see it has a very large cooktop, and every place is hot, and so you can put many big pots, little pots, all kinds of pots that you might need for. It's really handy in canning when you have a lot you want to put on the top. And I don't know, does anybody have any questions? Oh, okay. What happened? Oh, okay. Oh, yes. And what we did, beside it, there's 2 things there. You can see the rock top on the countertop right there by the stove. I just always thought a bad thing about a stove like that. You take a pot off, what are you going to do with it when it's hot? And so we just covered that part right next to the stove with rock, and I could just set the pots, whatever, right there. Really convenient. And then the little pull out underneath is a little wagon that we run to the wood closet that is there a picture? Okay. to fill it up and bring it back. That makes easier. In the door right there goes into a little pantry that's upstairs there out of the kitchen, and then to the right when you go in there is where there's a little closet for wood.
So you mentioned before, he mentioned about 3 different levels of heat that you have going, because you don't
Oh, okay.
boil everything.
Right.
You want something on simmer or something, so you have 3 different sections of your stove, so you must have 3 different compartments down below to do that?
Well, actually, what we meant by that is you see the top of the stove, and then to the left, you see a little door under the top that's, okay, has that silver around it. Okay, that is the wood box door. And because that's the wood box door, it is a lot hotter at that point than it is going across to the right. And so that is if you want something boiling quick. Actually, I found, yes, the front, but the back on that left side, the back is actually the hottest. And then going to the right, it gets progressively cooler. So if you just want to warm up a can of something while you're getting dinner, you just put it in a pan, put it clear to the right. You forget about it till it's time to eat, because it'll be warm, ready to eat. And then if you want to get potatoes boiling quickly or something, you'd put it more to the left.
Is there a thermometer on the front of the oven door?
Yes, it is. However, we have never calibrated it to work because I believe more in the little one that I can put in the stove of being more accurate. So we've never even tried to do this, but you're supposed to be able to fix it so it's correct. So yes, that's what it is. I guess I just got through baking bread here. And also then we had just picked raspberries from the greenhouse. And so I had all these gifts to do something with. Freeze probably is what I ended up doing with them. Now we're back to, yes, our puppy dogs. And I'll explain the rocks here. It's a nice, nice place. The dogs get it. The kids got it when they were at school. Oh, this is complicated. Maybe you should. This is the flue to our stove downstairs. And so this flue walkway area that encases the flue from downstairs heating stove is warm. It's wonderful. You come in, especially during the winter, you're outside, it's cold, your feet are cold. Actually, we've had kids on down further around the corners where the warmest spot is for there, because that's the closest to the heat source. You'll come in and the kids will be laying out on the rock floor, and it feels so good. And you can see the dogs learn the trick too. It feels pretty good. Anyway. Unless there's any other questions.
I might add, you saw the refrigerator there. It's just a normal refrigerator, but it's one of the Energy Stars, so it's as efficient as you can get. But our little hydro plant, I'll show you later, will run that refrigerator. It also runs another refrigerator in a cottage that we rent. It used to be our boys' bunkhouse. We remodeled it, and the fellow who stays there is a part-time caretaker for us, so it's helpful. He likes it. We enjoy it. And there was also a microwave you saw there, so she has all those, but we don't use a straight stove that's all electric, because they take like 5,000 watts, and that's a lot. Don't really need to do that. And you can often tell what the temperature is from the stove by just looking where Misty or Chloe lay, because if it was cooler and you might need to build a fire, they would be farther down towards the other end. If it's too hot, they come this way. I love it. We don't have a thermostat. You don't need a thermostat in a house like that, because it stays virtually a uniform temperature all the time because of the mass. But the dogs are the thermostat, kind of. You'll notice beyond Misty there is a stairway going down. And We've tried to build our whole home so it runs naturally, which means there's no fans, there's no blowers, no thermostats, no electronics, nothing. For that to work, you have to design your house so there's some place for the coolest air in the house to go downhill, because cold air is heavy and it goes down. So the cool air in the house either goes down this stairway and to the corner, I'll show you in a minute, around the corner to the left, there is a special hole where that cool air can go in, and it goes right to the bottom of the wood stove, the furnace that's downstairs. And that keeps the fire downstairs, the mess downstairs, and heat rises, and so it keeps warm floors upstairs. The room down below to the right is a recreation room, and that the cool air from our bedroom, which is in the whole far wing of the house, has a place in the closet where there's a nice little register, and the cool air from that room goes down there and goes through the rec room and over. If you don't have that, the air just stagnates, and you don't get air motion. And the flues have to be large, like this, where our whole rule is, rather than trying to overpower nature with fans and electricity and all that, you work with it. If you have a forced air furnace, and that's what it says, it's forced air, you have to have a lot of electricity to blow it through pipes because they're too small. If they're big, it flows naturally, and you don't get the sound. So that's how it all works. Down at the bottom, that's that rec room. Linda laid all that stone. A lot of that stone came from the hole when we dug it. That's why we didn't have a backhoe dig it, because they would have just ruined the rocks and buried them all. But as we dug, and we took it out in wheelbarrows, and that went, and I'll show you, it made a nice hairpin turn for the road going up to Ted and Rochelle's place. But we kept all the colorful, nice stones in a pile, and then when we were ready, we built this wall. And you'll see in a minute, the wall's a foot thick. She would lay the stone up about 2.5 feet with mortar, and then there was a space behind that of about 6 inches with rebar, and behind that was foam as the form. You pour concrete behind that, so the stones are literally poured into the wall. So it's super strong and a thick wall and holds tremendous heat. That's the whole idea. The whole floor under the carpet there is all insulated from the ground too. The only thing it isn't insulated are the footers, because the foam can't take the weight of the whole house. And that's the bottom of the steps, that's the little entry that allows the cold air to go inside, and inside it looks like that. And this is just a utility room. Her washing machine is there. You see the heater. And the heater doesn't look anything like you'd go to town and buy. Our neighbors just went to buy a stove that's probably a third that size for their cabin. It's about this big, and it's one of these fancy ones. It's all got catalytic converters and all the rest of it, which all clog up eventually. It cost $4,000. The last one we had of these cost $800, because I get the metal, I have it sheared at the steel place. It's all made out of one sheet, 4x8 sheet of 1/4-inch steel. It's welded inside and outside. It'll last 100 years. And it's just wonderful. It's not pretty to look at. It's not meant to be. It's just utilitarian. On top of it there, the kind of gray thing, that is fiberglass insulations designed for heat. And inside that is a 70-gallon hot water tank that's also welded. And the flue is 8-inch well casing, thick casing. It goes up from the stove right through that water, all welded. So whenever that stove is on, you're creating hot water automatically. 70 gallons is a lot of hot water. But there's another issue. In any houses this way, but it's more so when it's cold. In the summertime, we have 4 toilets in the house. If you flush them with our spring water's 40 degrees year-round. Your well water's probably not quite that cold, but similar. If you flush with that cold water, and the air in the room is warmer than the water, it condenses on the back of the toilet, and then it'll drip and it can get moldy. You solve all that problem. All I did is I bought an old used pressure tank. There's nothing wrong with the tank. I think it cost me $20, I think, for that big black tank. Our spring water goes into the bottom of that tank first. Out of the top of that, it goes over and down into the bottom of the hot water tank. And that tank just sits in the room, and particularly in the winter, the whole time you're heating, that tank gets up to basically room temperature. It's like 70, maybe even 80 degrees. It's not hot, but it's warmish. From the top of that, we go with a separate pipe that flushes all 4 toilets. So your toilets are getting hit with 70 or 80 degree water, they never sweat. And when you're trying to recover hot water because somebody took a lot of showers, instead of putting 40 degree water in, you're putting 70 or 80 degree water in, so you get a faster recovery time. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff you can do in a country home where it's all based on natural flow, and everything's so simple, and you don't have to have any pumps and all that sort of stuff. That's it. And it goes to all 4 bathrooms, all the showers. We even have a stone hot tub in our bathroom, in our bedroom. Didn't cost hardly anything because the stone's free, and we poured the concrete ourselves. We never had a truck to pour concrete. It was all mixed in a gasoline mixer, so we did it in batches so we'd know where we do them. And you can see the little door there. Simple, that's that can right there Linda was talking about. We have that wherever we have a stove, and that's filled with that starter mix that another person in the North Fork told me. Just dry sawdust, little bit of oil of any kind you can put in there, and it doesn't burn fast, burns hot, doesn't leave ash. We don't like paper. You throw paper in something like that, it leaves all kinds of ash. And we want to use the sawdust from our stove, not all of them. We have one we burn paper. The sawdust goes in your garden because it has phosphate in it. So it becomes fertilizer. Yes, we use diesel oil because it's the cheapest, but you could use any oil. And if we can't use oil someday, you'd use pitch from pine trees. It'd take just a little longer because, but we have a lot of pitch in our trees through the woods. Yeah, it's ash. Did I say it wrong? Ash goes in the garden. Yeah. That's another similar stove. This is in Ted and Rochelle's garage. They have a dual system, which is, because a lot of people think, well, I want to have propane. I don't want to have to get firewood if I don't want to, or in their case, they're still working. Rochelle hardly anymore. She works 3 shifts a month. Ted's working 10. But if they want to go off on a mission trip or whatever and they want everything to be automatic, they can do that. But it costs you twice as much for your utilities to install them because you have a dual system. But it's fine. But my advice is if you're going to have a dual system, your primary system should be wood because you can always get it from your own place. Propane's fine, but someday you won't be able to get it or it'll get horribly expensive. So that is their hot water. That one doesn't have any insulation on it. They found they really didn't need that. And they used that for a long time before they put the propane system in. That's that can again. That's what it looks like inside with sawdust and a little oil with it and a little thing to dip it out. This is the flue. This is still in that furnace room. This is the flue that goes up to heat the living room upstairs. Now the floor above it is all reinforced poured concrete, and that heats the floor to like 80 or 90 degrees. So you have a warm floor without having to have any tube in it, no pumps or anything. But for air movement, you need a flue, and instead of an 8-inch pipe, like I was talking about, it's 1 foot by 4 feet, and it just flows up there naturally. In the winter, you can see the ruffles on the plants we have there actually moving. The air is moving, but you can't hear anything. Where that comes out, this is the living room, and that flue comes out under those plants there. The reason for that little rockwork planter thing is to disguise the hole that's coming up from below. And that's see the little slit there? It's 4 inches wide and about 5, 6 feet long. And the plants love it, because look outside. That's shots taken in the wintertime. This is also a flue coming from the furnace room, but it's right in front of our front door. That's one of the best things we ever did. That hole's 3 feet deep, poured concrete. It's a flue for warm air coming up, but every time anybody, especially when we had students, walked in, they stomped their shoes there. If you put one of those outside, it all freezes up. And we've seen people do that. This, I think, is better. So it has 3 purposes. The third purpose is that it's a tunnel where I put all the electrical wires and plumbing and everything, so if anything goes wrong, it's not buried in concrete or anything, you can just crawl in there and fix it. And I thought that was important too. This is the flue that comes up into our bedroom from the same furnace room. I put the 1 foot stick there so you can see how big that flue actually is. It's about 1 foot by 16 inches to 20 inches. And you need that, and the warm air just flows in the bedroom, goes clear through the bedroom to the closet, down through a flue into the basement, and it continues to circulate. Now, at the top, up there, you see a blue handle. Those are the hot water pipes going everywhere, but that blue handle one is a special one, because in the middle of the winter, we produce way more hot water than we need. And we can fill our hot tub and all that, and you still have hot water, because you're really heating. And the hot water tank is the one on the left there. So when the hot water tank, there's a gauge. You can just see it at the top there. You can't really see the gauge, but there's a little white thing. When that gauge gets to about 140 degrees, and it doesn't happen quickly, but when we can see it and we know we have a good fire going and we're not going to use it, we just turn that blue valve. And what that is, that blue valve leads from the hot water heater all the way around, going uphill slightly, and goes into our bedroom through regular hot water baseboard heaters. And it flows naturally. There's no pump required at all. And the hotter it gets, the faster it flows. So it's like a radiator for the hot water system. It never overheats. It doesn't boil. It doesn't do anything. And it puts the heat to the very outside wall of the house. And that's in our bedroom. You can see the baseboard heaters going through there. And so we just use that when we need it. When we don't, we turn it off. We're back in the furnace room, and now you're looking at the end of the furnace room are 2 doors. You can see both of them there, and they're separated by about 6 or 7 feet. And the part between them was never dug. That's virgin earth in there. And we just poured the concrete and the stone walls around it so that the 2 rooms are insulated off from each other by an earthen mass. And where the rock is, the stone, there's blue foam, 2-inch variable foam behind that, so the furnace room stays really warm. Another thing I should add, you can see the wall on the right, and you can see the little flue where we throw the wood down right there, and the wood is stacked there neatly. Well, because that furnace room gets really hot and dry, Linda can hang clothes there to dry, and the firewood gets super heated so that it's really dry, because wood burns a lot better if it's really dry, not just air dry, than it does if it's a little bit damp. So that's what that's all for. But when you go into the root cellar, you want to have a double door so that there's no heat exchange between the 2 rooms. We've had people up there that have tried to just wall off a part of their basement. It's too warm. Flour starts to mold and grow bugs and so on. This is inside. There's actually 2 rooms in the root cellar. You can see all Linda's wonderful canning. And this is the other room where there's a freezer, and see the little hole at the top? That's that hole coming in from that outside vent. So 20-degree air, 10 below zero air comes whistling in there. And I need to tell you very quickly, because everybody has these problems, but in a wood-heated house, typically in the winter, it's too dry. That means the humidity is low. People run to the store and buy a humidifier. In a root cellar, because it's built directly into the hill, there's no foam or anything, it's in contact with damp ground, it tends to get moldy. And people shut every door they can and window they can when it's cold, trying to keep all those cold drafts out. And they tend to come in around every door and window upstairs. You can solve all 3 problems at once with no fans and no electricity, nothing, by having a root cellar with a vent. What happens, the 2 doors that you saw are closed. They're sealed all the way around except the bottom. And the heater's on the other side, sucking air, right? Sucking oxygen, combustion air. So when the air comes in that hole, it's sucked in by the heater because it needs some of that air. When it comes in, it's cold, and cold air can't hold a lot of moisture, so it's dry. That's why your house is dry in the wintertime. As it comes into the root cellar, the first thing it does, because it's really cold, is it drops straight down. Because it's heavy, it goes by the fins on the freezer, so the freezer hardly ever comes on. It's a lot more efficient that way. There's actually another freezer to the left. We have 2 that run off our little hydro plant. After that, the air kind of moves through the whole root cellar, and as it does, it warms up to about 40 degrees. Because this is all Fahrenheit, because that's what the surrounding concrete is. At that point, it's become humidified, because as it warmed up, it sucked all the moisture out of your root cellar, so you see there's no mold there. The root cellar is perfectly dry. And that air now, which is fresh, ventilated, humidified, partially warmed air, races under the two doors straight for your heater. The heater uses a little of it, and what it can't use for combustion goes up into the house, which humidifies your house, keeps it from being too dry, ventilates it, and if there's any excess, it all goes out the cracks around your windows and doors, not in, so you never feel any cold drafts. So you've solved all three problems at once. It's just amazing. I learned that the hard way in our first cabin we built. We call it the mistake house, because we did it all wrong the first time. It was fortunately a little house and didn't cost much. That's looking towards that other freezer. The jugs that you see there are discolored because of the flash. They're actually white. And in this room is mostly dried beans, anything that could actually get really cold. The other side is where we keep potatoes and so on that can't freeze. I've never known it to freeze in here anyway, but you want to be careful. On the top in there is our whole seed storage, because we keep all our own seeds that we possibly can, and we'll talk about that a little later. This is building our house. I'll just show you a few pictures. This was Rudy. He was a wonderful friend, an Adventist, and his wife who lived there during this time. They don't live there anymore. You can see the date there was 96 or something. And he had been a contractor back in Michigan. He was great help. He came often. We usually poured on Sundays. It would take us all week to strip forms, put up new forms, do what we had to do. And whatever neighbors around wanted to come, Wernicks are having another pour. That happened for a few months, and then we were done with concrete. This is the root cellar, and you want the root cellar poured into the wall. So Linda did all that just rough stonework so that we could pack dirt behind it so it's actually contacting the dirt. And you see the rebar, then we poured the concrete. In the background, you see where the other rooms downstairs were, and they had foam. And this is how you do a ceiling. We built forms, just plain 2x4s, and put 4x4s under them, and then we have lots of lodgepole there. We just cut lodgepole poles, put underneath, and you had to have one every 2 feet. It was kind of like a little forest in there to take that massive weight of the floor that's going to be poured on top. That's how we mixed. That's me with a wheelbarrow. That's Linda pouring it in. And the young lady on the left there, this is her boy. He's actually her nephew that she was taking care of. He ended up being one of our best students. He stayed all 4 years at our academy, and he now works for the, he's the tech guy for Georgia Columbia Conference back east. There we're pouring concrete, shows how it works, sliding down a chute. That's how you pour a ceiling. I had another friend who knew more than I did. He had taken some engineering. The way you pour a concrete floor is very important. If anybody wants to know details, I can tell you, but basically the rebar is at the bottom of the pour so that for it to break, it has to pull the rebar out of the concrete. And that's how they build all the highway bridges and all the rest. Works really, really well. That's the ceiling over our root cellar. And that's just pouring there near that's one of them, the pours all finished, hand troweled. This is how the rock work went up. That's that rec room where Linda's laying the rock. And then we poured concrete behind it by just shoveling it in there, covering the rock with plastic. Yeah, you may know this young man. That's a McComb, John McComb, if you know him. He was a student there for a while. Yeah, John Boy. That's Linda laying more rock in our furnace room. And of course, as it always does, when the summer we wanted to pour all this concrete, it rained and rained. So we built temporary ceiling stuff. We just beat Old Man Winter. This is pouring the flue for our fireplace. Again, done by hand. See the person at the bottom? They just filled up a 5-gallon bucket, pulled on a rope. Somebody at the top grabbed it, handed it to me, and of course, because I was the fall guy, I got to walk the plank. and we walked over, poured it in there, and we'd pour 7 yards that way. And it took 5 or 6 hours. This is framing afterwards. That's Rochelle on the left. By the time we got to framing, the students were back, and they helped with the framing, which was a good experience for them. And that was going to be her room, so she was so happy that her room was going up. And we didn't have a lift, so we lived in the solarium and the bunkhouse. I'll show you. And that's lifting those big beams into place. And that's what it looked like after you're done. It was tongue groove. There's foam behind that so that the wood all stays dry. If you try to put fiberglass in there, it absorbs moisture. There's all kinds of stuff like that if you're going to build a country home that you need to know. That's Linda doing rock work on the fireplace. But when the students were there, she had a couple of big guys because the rock she was lifting there probably weighed 100 pounds. They were big rocks, some of them 3 to 4 inches thick. So she knew what she was doing. She'd mortar it all, and she'd say, "Okay, guys, heave." And they did, and that's how it got done. This is after we had just finished, but we didn't have the siding on. And another thing, it's important in cold country, if some of you are moving to where it's colder than here, after you build your whole house and put plywood or chipboard on the outside, you don't want to put siding immediately, because if you do that, that outside wall gets super cold. Moisture comes through your wall, even though you put a vapor barrier. It all goes to the outside wall and freezes. And then in the spring, when it melts, you have a wet, soggy wall on the inside. And the way you prevent that is you put foam, that's 1.5 inch foam, over the entire thing without any breaks in it except around windows. That keeps that outer wall warm enough that it doesn't happen. I didn't know that the first time around. And that's how we milled a lot of our own lumber. This picture was taken later because from before I didn't have pictures of milling. I was too busy. And that's little Curtis. So this picture was taken maybe 3-4 years ago, and we had a big spruce tree that fell, and we were making lumber out of it. We've milled probably 30,000 board feet with a chainsaw mill like that. Saved us tens of thousands of dollars. Beams, anything you want. And again, you can go to town, away from your family, make money, pay all the taxes, all the commuting, everything else, take that wad of money home, and you can go buy the lumber. Or you can work with your family and do it at home. And we've done that for a long, long time. That's the kind of boards, and we edge them. You can edge them with a chainsaw too, but we learned, I did that with a skill saw, because then you get a much straighter, beautiful cut, and you can make beams and 2x6, whatever you want. All the paneling, that's our dining room, all the paneling in there was cut with a chainsaw. Not all the paneling was in the whole house, but several places. That's the family. We generally don't plane it. You'd be surprised if the saw, and I can tell anybody, you have to file the saw different. It comes out really smooth. But you can plane it or sand it. We sanded these lightly. That's what the house kind of looked like when it was done in the first winter. Of course, to heat a house, this is just firewood. I know you all know about firewood, but I mentioned we have some trees. That tree is probably 400 years old. We don't cut those. And we have a nice little pathway, and that's our kind of, I guess you'd call it the Trail of the Cedars, or of the Larch, Patriarch Trail we call it. The largest one, Linda's standing next to, that's 165 feet tall and 500 years old. And we love those old big trees. What we do is cut all the little ones that you see in the background around it. And that's what the forest looks like when you clean it out. We leave the good trees, the big trees, the straight trees, the nice ones, the fire-resistant ones. We cut all the little ones out, and that's what it looks like when you put it in the woodshed. We used to cut all good wood, not off our own place, and we'd have to split it all and all that. Well, what you need is to clean your woods out, and the woods always needs more thinning. And so we now burn mostly spruce and pine, even though it's not as good as firewood. It burns hot and clean, and it keeps your place clean. That woodshed will hold about 2 years' supply. And I sure encourage you, if you heat with wood, have 2 years. Something happens to somebody and you get hurt, at least your wife can be warm for 2 years, not 1. And it dries out better. Now this is water system. The best water system you can possibly have for a country home is a gravity-fed spring. It's worth looking for it. We have many sites in our valley that are like that. People just don't know about them. Most people that come and just want a cottage or a cabin in the woods, they could care less. They don't, some of them haul their water. Some of them, they have a pump. They don't care if it takes a generator. They're not thinking about not being able to buy or sell. And besides that, it's so nice to never have to start a generator, never have to worry about a pump replacing it. It just flows down the hill. And I took that because in the background you see the mountains. The water comes from the ocean, runs over BC, and then lands on us, dumps there, and then that snow melts and feeds a whole aquifer. This is one of our springs that we dug this all by hand, because if you stick a machine in there, you can ruin the spring. And I have 3 of those, and it took me about 2 or 3 weeks, not all day long, but 2 or 3 weeks of digging carefully, saving the rock, finding the clay. It's all lined with native clay rather than plastic and concrete and all that. It's about 40 feet long, and it holds thousands of gallons, and there's 3 of those. At the far end, you can see, it's hard to see, but there's a little box there that has the intake, screened intake. That's what it looks like in the winter, early winter, when all the brush is gone, same spring, and you can see how high it is relative to the house. We don't use this water in the house. This is what feeds our hydro. The spring that feeds our house is a little above this and looks like that. But because there's so much water flowing through it, we haven't even covered it. We've never had any trouble at all with it. And I like the free flow. It has a nice stainless steel strainer there, and you can always access it and clean it if you need to. And I'm not a scientist. I'm an armchair scientist. I took physics, chemistry, and all that. But I maintain there's vitamin B12 in ground everywhere, but not in very many plants. But if you drink spring water that comes from a surface source that isn't hit with agricultural runoff and all that, I think you actually get vitamin B12 from that water because it's coming through the water. This spring water is crystal clear.
So none of it freezes up in the winter?
No, all our spring water is 40 degrees. Our ground is 40 degrees year-round. That's why the root cellar is so easy to have a good root cellar. And it keeps the water cold, and it keeps them from freezing in the wintertime. Now, you'll get a skiff of ice over that if it gets to 30 below, but it doesn't freeze the water to speak of.
What altitude did you say your house is at?
It's at 3,600 feet, 3,600. The top of our hill is 3,800. Now,
How far does it freeze when it gets so cold? How cold does it get freezing?
it gets down to 40 below. At that, you'll get a skim of ice over those little Fahrenheit. Well, that's centigrade, too. The reason, the water is like this little spring there, that one runs nearly 10,000 gallons a day. So it's just, before it can freeze, it's gone. And more water runs out at 40 degrees. That's how it works. Springs are wonderful. I can't emphasize it. It's worth finding them. Here's how I see it. Like we said, 90% of everybody's living in a city. And the other 10%, almost all of them, are kind of headed to the city. For the people who really want to live in the mountains and live God's lifestyle, there is good property. There's not good property for everybody, but there is for you and me, because we're about the only ones that want it. Most people don't value Gravity Spring on their place. All they're looking for is the view. They're only there for 2 days every month or two. That's the way it is. So look for that. They're all over the place. Ours are enough flow that we actually make our electricity from them too. Now I wanted to show you this little stream. It's probably 10 inches a foot wide and maybe half an inch thick. That much water will run your electricity for your house. It doesn't take a lot of water. In fact, that's the water that I'm not running through the hydro at the minute. And this is the kind of pipelines we put in. These are 3-inch lines. On the left, the dirt looks really nice, rock-free. It's because we picked every rock out of it, because I'm going to backfill with that. And first, we dig the hole. We only dig it about 1 foot to 2 feet, because it's all dug by hand. And then you put the pipes in. You cover them with sawdust, so they're insulated. They're protected from rocks. And then anytime you have to replace them, which sometimes you do, you always know where they are. As soon as you hit the sawdust, you're there. And then we put that dirt back on top. And this is me wheeling rocks. These are the rocks we picked out of that dirt, wheeled back. Those rocks all go on a road as the rough cobble, and then you put nice gravel on top. Ted is getting sawdust that we got from a neighbor, and we're wheeling back sawdust, and there he is putting it in the ditch. And Misty's sitting on the nice soil that we got the rocks out of, and that soil will all be put back. And you see how black that soil is? That's because it's near one of our springs, and that's where we got a lot of the good dirt for our gardens. That's our pond, a little piece of it. And in the background there, that is our powerhouse. Because you don't want things to freeze, we built it into the hill and then covered it with dirt, so it's just one side open. That's what it looks like in the winter. And so you need a place that you can, everything's not out in the weather. And inside it looks like that. It's very simple. There's those two little water turbines. There's a jet. The water's going about 70 miles an hour because it's dropping 80 feet. And it's only like maybe a 1/4 inch little stream, and just psh, and it hits this little bitty turbine. And it's a Pelton turbine. It's just spinning that. There's one moving part. They're all brushless. They'll last up to 7 years with no maintenance. Then you do have to put bearings. The bearings cost maybe $5 or $6. And you just go and go and go most of the time. I want to show you the thing in the background there. And I'll show you that later. That is the cleverest little thing. What that is, it's not a ram. It's called a high lifter. And it works on the principle of a hydraulic jack that you'd use like this under your car. And the principle there is if you have two cylinders that are different sizes and you pump pressure on one, the other will only go up maybe 1/4 as much, but with 4 times the pressure. That's how it works. This works the same way. You have to have a spring or a source of water that's above where you're putting this, but it will then pump this. It's 60 feet ahead to here, but it'll pump it 220 feet into the air. And that goes up those ditches all the way to Ted and Rochelle's house at the top of the hill. And it takes no electricity. It's water pumping water, and it's actually lubricated by the water itself. They have run now for 4 or 5 years with no maintenance. And you can just get it. That's a closer look at one of the turbines. We just have simple batteries. Because we have a hydro plant, you don't need that many batteries because you're producing power continuously, almost the same that you're using. It just kind of floats at the top. So is the pressure. We have about 36 pounds pressure. And we can produce about 30 amps at 12 volts. Doesn't sound like a lot. At best, it's about 400 watts. But if you do 400 watts for 24 hours, that's 10 kilowatts. And 10 kilowatts is actually close to what an average American house uses if they use no electricity for heat or cooking or anything like that. If you do, it's more. And no air conditioning, of course. We don't need air conditioning. And produces lots of light, keeps your house nice and bright. This is what it looks like in the winter, and the reason it's not frozen there is because that's the outflow of that 40-degree spring water from the hydro plant. In the path, you see over there is a bridge. It's hard to see it, but there's snow on it. That bridge goes to Rochelle's Island. And that's her little playhouse there. You'll see that later. Beyond that is the rest of the pond. That's an island, and that becomes the ice skating pond. This is what it looks like in the winter there. This is about as deep as it gets, and you can see that the fountain is almost covered, but still bubbling away. No ice on it because of that 40-degree water. And that's our garden in the background, and you're not growing anything this time of year. That shows you how deep the snow can be, and I didn't shovel that all by hand. We do some shoveling by hand, but that was done with a walk-behind snowblower. But we used to do it mostly by hand, and you can, or you would just stomp a trail. That's what the solarium looks like in the winter. This was in, I think, the first week of February, and this next picture was taken the same day, inside. There's flowers. There are not as many as there are in the summertime, The fig tree is dormant. The pools are there to heat the building and hold the heat. There's no pumps, no filters, no chemicals. It's just spring water. But you can heat it with wood and heat it with the sun in the winter, in the summertime, and you can actually use it. It's like having your own little therapy pools, but they also humidify the place and keep it more uniform temperature. This is more in the early spring. The rock work over there again was done by Linda and Rochelle. Free labor. The big tree on the left is a fig tree, and we've tried all kinds of things in there. We've gotten some lemons. We've gotten a few olives. We tried avocados. They're too hard to pollinate. Tree grew fantastic. Figs really work, and the reason is because they have those huge leaves, and they can collect low light or filtered light, and we get hundreds of figs off that tree. It's like 20 feet tall at the tallest. I'm always looking for flowers that will blossom in the winter. This is one of the few. This is an Natal lily. I found it down in San Diego at the Balboa Park. Have you ever been there? The secret to it is I saw that it was behind a whole bunch of bushes out of the sun and just crowded back in there. And I asked somebody, why are these, and it was in blossom at that time, why are these all crowded back in here? And they said they can't get any direct sunlight. I said, that's my flower. They make these beautiful flowers late winter, and they want no direct sun. So they're just perfect in there. So we do those just for fun. And then bird of paradise will grow in there too, but they don't last forever. They usually last maybe 7, 8 years, and you have to get another one. That's from upstairs. That's what the figs look like. And believe it or not, that fig tree will grow a fig at every major leaf. The innermost leaves that don't get enough sun don't. But the new big leaves that come out, look at them all in there. Just every leaf produces a fig. I mean, you can't get better than that. That's how big they are in the spring. They're only about half that size. The largest crop is in the late summer, fall into October. And they're absolutely delicious. Linda dries them. She freezes them. We found the best thing, because we'll get so many. You can take like 60 of them, and you put it in a pan. You cut them, put them in a pan, just put them on the wood stove, and they look basically dry. I mean, and instantly almost, it boils the water out of them, and you don't have to add any water, so you add no sugar. And the whole thing cooks down to this thick fig jam that is absolutely delicious, and then you just can it like that, or freeze it. And you can eat a lot of figs that way. It's so tall, I've put catwalks up there that I can get at to pick them. I'm up in the second story. This is the ill-fated avocado. It blossomed wonderfully. It has big leaves. It loved it in there, grew clear to the ceiling virtually. And I don't have time. Those of you who are avocado aficionados, you know the problem, but they're really difficult to pollinate. And they guaranteed me at the nursery down in South Carolina where I got this that it was self-pollinating, and it wasn't. So that's our olive tree. There was a few olives. We finally took it out because it doesn't bear enough to be worth it. A few lemons and lots of flowers. And if we had to buy all the flowers, I was telling people before, we figured it cost us at least $2,000 for the flowers that we grow and overwinter. So it's well worth it. We have flowers all over the place, and they're meant to complement the wildflowers. These are wild lupins. And of course, wild rose. And now the idea is, how in the world do you heat a place like that? We've learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes to begin with and all that. But basically, a big greenhouse that doesn't even have a ceiling, because there's no insulation, just glazing up there, can get really cold. But cold air sinks. So when the cold air comes in, it wants to go down, and it'll just settle on the floor if you let it. So you need to have a furnace room that's below, not the whole thing. And that patio you see out there where the little table and chairs are, that is actually a furnace room, and that's a concrete ceiling. And it goes down underneath there.
Absolutely beautiful.
And it heats, again, by the cold air going down here. I'll go faster. I don't want to lose everybody. That's the heater downstairs. That's the only heater. It's homemade, and it's designed to heat water. It's a 200-gallon old tank. I paid, I think it was $70 for the tank, and had a friend help me weld it up. You build a fire in there, it heats all the water, and the water, you can do everything. We run a shower, we run the pools, we water the plants with 100-degree water, do the laundry and all the rest of it. This is how you get firewood down there. We use a homemade jig like that. You can cut about a third of a cord in 5 minutes. Everything, you got to be efficient if you're going to live in the country, you know. And then it is wheeled over, dumped down a chute, which doubles as a cold air return. Goes downstairs, it's stacked like that, and that amount of wood that you see there is about enough to run the solarium for the whole winter. It only takes about 3 cords. Solarium also does something else. This is a room to the side of it, and we start hundreds of starts. They won't germinate at 50 or 60 degrees, which is what the solarium is in the dead of the winter. They want about 80 degrees. And so this little room is insulated. It has a hot water tank. I heat water to 200 degrees in the pool heater, run it through here. It heats that little room to 80 degrees, and everything pops out of the ground. When it's grown up and got its first true leaves, whatever you're doing, cucumbers, tomatoes, melons, you know, eggplant, squash, all that stuff, then you bring it into the solarium. It'll grow fine in the solarium, but it won't germinate. All nurseries have a place like that, but theirs are all done with electricity. They have these heating pads and all the rest of it, grow lights and whatnot. You can see the starts in there starting. And then what we do some of the time is we have a cover that will cover the main pool. We drain it, put it on, and whenever we want to have a program in there or a baptism or whatever, all the VIPs sit on that floor. But we can also cover it, put plastic over it, and it gives us the place to put all our starts in the spring. As soon as they're all out in the gardens and so on, we take it off and fill it back with water. And this is just a few shots of building that place. Same thing, you put the foam on the outside. I milled all these beams with a chainsaw, but after many, many years, some of them are starting to get soft and go bad, and we're going to have to replace them because it's damp in there. It's been 20-some years, I think. That's what it looked like inside. Same thing, trying to keep it dry. This was before any of the stonework was done. That's the fig tree before it grew. I have to cut it every year now. Probably 6 feet off because it grows clear to the ceiling. That's how we mix the concrete. That's Matt showing me his teeth. He would wheel it over up a ramp and so on. This was the classroom before when we were just building it. Linda did all the stucco work in there. And this was the final graduation. That was Rochelle's graduation. It was done pretty much inside where they could use it, but we were still working on the outside, and that's Rudy, who helped me a lot. The young fellow on the left was one of Rochelle's classmates. There were 4 seniors that year, and he is now the senior pastor in Edmonton. He married a Canadian girl, so that's why he's up here. Hamstra is his name. This is our automatic hot water system for the summer. It's just 5,000 feet of 1-inch pipe, 40-degree water in one end, comes out about 90 to 100 on the other end, and on a summer day we get 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of warm water. You can do whatever you want. The kids play in it in sprinklers. We water all our sensitive plants, like tomatoes and beans and all that, and we run it in the pool. And it doesn't take any pumps, nothing. It just sits on the roof. That's the solarium. The building to the left is our orchard greenhouse. We have a hard time growing fruit trees there because it's so cold, and it can frost when they're in blossom, and many other reasons. We have a few outside, but they do very little. So that's what it looks like in the spring. There's peach trees, there's 2 apricot trees, there's 1 plum tree, there's 2 pear trees, and 2 apple trees. And in the beginning, we thought we had to hand pollinate them because we don't have any bees that time of year. You'll see here, this picture, that's what it looks like. This is on a March day, likely, maybe early April. There's still snow all the way. It's still winter outside. But it's open in there because there's so much sun, and they're all in blossom. But where are the insects coming from? We learned, this was Linda's genius, Jerry, just shake them. We learned that peaches, apricots, plums, anything that has a pit is almost always self-pollinating. All you need is a little wind. You just shake it. But pears and apples are not, and you have to go back and forth with a little brush. It's beautiful work in the spring. I mean, winter's been long. You go in there, beautiful blossoms. You're in your shirt leaves. Takes an hour maybe, and you go over these and you go over that, and then you get fruit. This building, I'll show you the heater in a minute. We do not heat it hardly at all because we want it to freeze in the winter. So it's an 8-month season. We found in our valley we have 8 months with plenty of sun to grow almost anything, but it's too cold. So in here, in March, it can be 70 degrees with the sun coming in, and it's 20 degrees outside with snow, but it could get down to 0 outside. On those few nights like that, I start a fire. I'll show you that. It's what I call a stump burner. It's a huge, just steel box, and you can throw punky wood, brush, literally stumps in there, and we use our waste wood that you just burn in a burn pile. And we usually run 5 or 6 fires in March. The other nights are fine, and 5 or 6 in October because we still have tomatoes ripening, possibly apples and so on. And then when November 1 comes, we just shut it down. Within a week or two, it freezes, and it stays pretty much frozen in there for 4 months. But it never gets below about 20. Even with no heat, even at 30 below, it'll be close to 20 in there, above. And so the fruit trees get a wonderful dormant period, which they need, without getting too cold. And you don't get deer eating them and mice. You don't get ice storms. I know even out here, if you got rain in the wrong time, you can get an ice storm, and it ruins your fruit trees and so on. This is what the rolling shutters on top look like. We've since that's closed, and you see the snow piles up on top, which insulates the whole place in the wintertime. Then in the spring, it all slides off. So you can use it, and this is what it looks like. These are peaches getting pretty ripe. And we have since taken the rollers off and put a sliding shutter, which was Ted's genius idea. I don't have pictures of that yet. But you can do it with it takes a 12-volt battery and one solar cell. That's more peaches. That's peaches. You can see how thick they are. That's the Red Haven peaches, a different kind. That's pears, that's Bartlett pears, that's D'Anjou pears, you gotta have 2, and that's Macintosh apples. This is the pollinator apple, a Kerr. Plums, and our biggest crop by far is apricots. Apricots are hard to grow because they're the first to blossom, so they usually get frozen out if you have them outside. And we have gotten up to 300 pounds of apricots off that one tree. It's just loaded. This past year weren't as many, but usually that's the way it is. This is again what it looks like in the spring, and you can see it's too shallow in the front to grow fruit trees, so we use that to grow tomatoes and green beans. That's Curtis helping Grandma, putting the bean seed in, and in a few weeks it looks like this. And you get green beans, and the tomatoes are all there on the left, and they're green, but they're not bearing yet. Excuse me. And the green beans will soon be done, get shaded out, pull them out. And we don't even grow green beans there anymore now. We're growing other things. We grow them in a different greenhouse. On the right, you see all the raspberries begin, and we get huge raspberries, and they're very early. We can get raspberries outside, but not near as much. That's what they look like. Linda freezes lots and lots of them. Tomatoes in the front. Some of our tomatoes even get as big as Okanagan ones. That's the heater. It's 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. And see the little black bob on the top there? That's Panther. That's our feral wild cat that we put in there. We got from the pound to get a hold of any mice or chipmunks. And for the first 7 to 10 years, she did her job faithfully. Now she just wants food, and she doesn't do her job. I have no idea how old she is because she was an adult when he got her, but she loves it in there. That's what it looks like with stumps and everything burning in there. It's a big stove. We use it like 10 or 12 times a year, except we also burn trash in there. That's my stump pile. We used to burn all our stumps or leave them in the ground. I mean, they make wonderful wood for that. This is the outside garden. You can grow things outside there. We actually raise most of our food outside, but only things that are frost hardy, except for potatoes. We can water them down when it frosts. I usually have to have 4 or 5 nights in the early summer when it would kill all the potatoes, but I just take my 40-degree spring water and you just sprinkle them or run sprinkler on it for 4 or 5 hours and then it's fine. They love damp, cold weather, but they can't frost. And this is the fence. This is our second iteration, and notice the the roofing on top preserves that fence. So it's virtually like the day we put it in there, and I think it's been there 15, 20 years now. Otherwise, the wood would rot. This is what it looks like in the wintertime. What did you say you put on top of the fence? It's sheet metal. And so you don't look at that. Otherwise, all that moisture would go into all that wood when it melted in the spring. And that also shows you we get virtually no wind up there because of the high mountains around us. So our winters are long but mild and windless, which is really nice that way. I consider them mild because a typical winter day is about 20, maybe 25 at daytime, and at night it's like 10 to 15. That's a typical day. Occasionally it can drop clear to 40 below zero, and occasionally it gets above freezing. But that's the average, but it lasts 5 months. Yes, that metal screen there goes up the first 3 feet, and that's to keep out Columbia ground squirrels. And notice they're named after you folks. Do you have them here? Yeah. Do you have Columbia, what are called Columbia ground squirrels? They are a squirrel. They look just like a squirrel, but they dig burrows in the ground. So they dig under everything, and they eat your whole garden. I didn't, because that was too much work then. And what we found is that it's only in an inch or two, so they can't just go in. They have to dig. And when we first saw that and they dig, I'd quick run out there and fill the hole again. And they'd come right back to the same place and dig it out again. And I went, yes. So now we never dig their hole out. Instead, we put a live trap just inside the garden, blocked with a couple of bricks, so they can't go anywhere but come up out of their hole and straight into the trap. They go in there every time. And once Fred goes in there, they have a musk odor. Everybody else thinks it's safe. And we have caught up to 30 or 40 in one trap in the same hole in the summer, at different times. But our biggest haul, we've caught over 100 trying to get in the garden in 1 year. But after you get that many, there aren't that many. Typically now I'd say it's 20 or 30. But boy, if they get in when your plants are young, they'll eat everything they can. They're cute little guys. They look like a little prairie dog, but they're not as big. Yeah. And it also keeps rabbits out and a lot of mice and everything else. We've started to mulch everything. Makes a huge difference. We used to fight weeds a lot more than we do now. That's onions, peas. Peas are frost hardy. Onions are frost hardy. That's potatoes, dill, and you see the Swiss chard and parsley and all of that. You can raise strawberries there. The strawberries are like fruit trees. If it frosts when they're in blossom, it kills the fruit, and the plant does great, and you don't get any berries. So we have a way of covering them just on those few frosty nights in the spring. And we can grow raspberries outside, but they're about 6 weeks later, which is nice. You get a later crop, but they're never as prolific and they're not near as big. This is the only other bean. Some of you may know some, but this is the only other legume that we've been able to find besides peas that is frost hardy, and this is fava beans. They're a huge lima-like bean, and they can take down to 25 degrees. They're amazing, and they come from the Middle East. I don't know why. Cabbage, of course, does fantastic there because it loves cool, damp. That's the garden from above. In the back is our hot house, because we learned even in the other 2 greenhouses it wasn't hot enough to grow some things like beans and squash. That's a single or double zucchini plant. I mean, you can grow zucchini here, I know, but they get huge in there. and you get tons of summer squash, tomatoes, you can grow melons in there, and that's where we store the cabbage down in the root cellar. Cabbage is difficult to store. It wants to be at 32 degrees. In other words, 0 in centigrade. If it gets very much above that, it will last for a couple, 3 months, but eventually it'll mold if it's too warm. So we put it right there where the cold air's coming in. The green will last a few months. The red will last all winter. So we grow more red now. Onions grow really well, but for some reason, and if some of you are better on onions, that's what our onion patch looked like for years and years and years. The last 2 years, we've gotten some that look like that, but most of them haven't grown very well. They're little. And you can put them in different soil and all of that, but I think it has to do with the light because they're very light sensitive. If the light isn't right, they don't produce a bulb. This is what they look like with the mulch. We have to dry them a little bit because they come out really wet because they're pulled late in the fall. And that's over that heater that Panther was on. So we use that heater to dry things because there's hundreds of them. And then once they're dried, we hang them in our potting room that we don't use in the wintertime, and you have onions whenever you want them. It's wonderful.
Do you sell this food, or is this all for yourself?
Our purpose, I didn't say this earlier, our purpose was to grow enough food so that if we couldn't buy and sell, we would live. It wouldn't be real fun. It'd be a lot of fig and apricot smoothies and potato and onion soup and, stuff like that, but you could live. But when the kids were there, we fed a lot of it to the kids. We still eat avocados and mangoes and always will as long as we can get them safely and we can still buy them. But we don't want to be dependent on that. So we're trying to grow. We can grow about 3,000 pounds of food. We end up selling about a third of that now because for another witness for us now that we're not doing, we run a garden market. And I'll show you pictures of that. It's a wonderful outreach. Every Adventist family should do that.
So how much food does a person need for, how much of your, I guess, two questions, like how much of your groceries currently you buy, and how much you grow, and how much do you need to have, like, per person? How many acres per person?
Probably, it's different between calories and pounds. I'd say by volume, we probably grow half of what we eat, just because we love avocados and bananas and all that, and so forth. But, of course, the USDA says that a person needs about 2,000 calories. You don't need 2,000 calories. You are, if you're a big, normal American and a little overweight and eat more than you really should. It also depends on your activity level, too. When we were in California, when we were young, we wanted to know this very question. So we got the big book that tells you how many calories are in everything you eat. And we carefully, for a month, we had turned vegan then completely, and we ate out of a farmer's market, basically, avocados and peppers and bread, what Linda made bread and whatnot. And we figured out how many calories we were actually eating. It was about 1,100. And we were thin. But we weren't, I wouldn't call that the Auschwitz diet. But you can get by on less than 1,100 too. But there is a limit, and we would supplement what we have, we do now, but a lot more with wild berries. That's what the Indians did, basically. They picked all kinds of berries, and our mountains are just loaded with huckleberries there. But it's a little effort to go out and get them.
Did I miss anything, or did you say anything about growing nuts or any fats? Like you said, you buy avocados and you like
Yeah.
avocados, and you have and olives too.
Beans are the only thing we grow that have some oil in them, basically. I mean,
Is there somewhere nearby where you can buy nuts? Or?
we can buy anything we want. Costco's just down the road. We just don't want to be dependent on it. We buy nuts and all that. We're going to eat as good a diet, not overeat, but the healthiest diet. But I don't know about you, I'm becoming a little more and more concerned about even where my cashews come from. I mean, they're grown in like Bangladesh, and I love those folks and all that, but they don't have the same standards we do. And what kind of labor is used to get those? You got to think about those things more and more. And one of these days, we're going to realize it's probably not safe to buy a lot of the food that you buy in the store. It may still be now. So, but we want to be able to grow the food. And all those flowers you saw in the solarium, they wouldn't be flowers. When that time came, all that thing would be filled with greens and what you can grow in there so you could grow more food.
Do you have native nuts? Like, I don't know if you have,
The only thing I have read about that might grow in our greenhouse is filberts. They are very cold tolerant. And actually, I had a person from California, I think it was, told me that they think we could grow almonds in our solarium because they can take low light and they like the environment we have there. It might, maybe we can.
also, do you like barter and trade with people in the
Yes.
area and then maybe cross state lines or something?
Not across state lines. We do run this garden market. We've sold well over 300 pounds of potatoes already. Our neighbors love the potatoes. One lady came to us, we've known her for 40 years. Her husband wouldn't eat potatoes. He's a meat and potatoes guy, but he just wouldn't eat them anymore because the ones they were getting in the store, they're just kind of dry and they were granular. He just didn't like them anymore. So she got some of ours. They're moist. They're wonderful tasting. They're different. She fed him those. He loves potatoes now. So it's a real witness. He came and told me that personally. He was a commercial pilot for years. Yeah.
How many people are working this operation?
Oh, about 75. It's Linda and I. Since Ted and Rochelle have come, they help some, but Ted still works in the ER, so he does a little. His contribution has been to help us come out of the dark ages and put a drip line into everything. He's really good at that. And it saves water. We have plenty of water, but it does save time, so we've done all of that. Rochelle's there more. She helps a lot. So at most, it's probably 3 of us. And people often ask, what do you do? We have figured out that our gardening takes us about an hour each a day, 6 days a week, over the year. In the spring, it's way more. In the winter, it's virtually nothing. And in the summer, it gets down to very little till the harvest comes. Then it's a lot more. So,
Earlier about that, cautioning people that they don't go and hibernate away from their community. So how are you involved in your community? You told me, I think, on the phone about you have like a town meeting with people, you've been teaching them, they've been wanting to learn how to do it, something at what you're doing. You have a town meeting once a year of what's working well, what isn't working, or tell us how you're involved.
Okay.
in the community.
yeah, our main ministry, of course, for 35 years was running the school. And the kids worked for our neighbors, and we interacted, and they came to their baptisms, they came to their graduations and so on. And that was a really big witness. Now that we're not doing that, our main witness now is our garden market. And in the spring, they've asked us, the community there, there's about 400 landowners that are part of the Landowners Association. We're part of that too, and they have a meeting once a month. And they put out this whole bulletin of all the activities. There's stargazing, there's square dancing, there's hiking trips that people do, and on there is Warnick's Market every month. It's there. People love it. So that's there, and in the spring, we have the Gardeners Roundtable, and that meets at our place too, at our gazebo. And so all the people that are interested in gardening at all, they come, and at that time we have flowers and stuff like that, but we don't have much food yet. It's in May. And so we all discuss, successes and failures and so on, discuss why we're a vegetarian sometimes, a plant-based diet. I mean, it's wonderful. That's that. And Linda has recently, a lot of the ladies that come to that, she has asked them, she said, why don't we start a Bible, a ladies' Bible study? So they've started that. And it's been a real success. So that's our witness there too. I'm also been on some committees in the valley. I'm still on the fire mitigation committee because we have a whole committee of trying to prod the Forest Service, do more thinning, and take care of the woods, and help people, all the neighbors, to know how to thin their property. I don't want to take too much time. We have a big fire mitigation on our own place with water, So if a fire ever came, I think it would just go around us. You're not going to save the whole forest.
Can you talk about how you did this from an income perspective, or
Sure.
curious to see, like, this is always the question that's in my mind, is like, where does the money come from?
Okay. I'll try and make it really brief. We learned very quickly, your tax system is a little different up here, so you'd have to mold it to your taxes. We pay our taxes faithfully. I believe in the government. I don't believe in everything they do, but they keep up nice roads and they're running the defense to take care of us. And so, but I want to pay as legally as little as is really our portion. So we learned real quick that in the United States anyway, if you, this isn't today's dollars, it was a little less years ago, but if you make somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000 a year, they think you're poverty-stricken. It's based on a family of four living in the city, having to pay all their utilities and all their food and everything else. Well, on $20,000, $30,000 where we have no rent, no mortgage, hardly any taxes, hardly any food bill, no utility bills, about all we have is insurance. And you don't have to have that except on your car. And so that 20, 30,000, we had just as much discretionary income left over as people who were making $80,000 or more in town. Because at that rate, because they think you're poor, you pay no income tax. And
You can live on $20,000 or $30,000.
yeah, we did virtually our whole life there.
And even now.
But yes, that's about what we get. It's probably closer to 30,000. Part of the reason is you pay absolutely no tax. And tax really gets on, I don't know what it is up here, but it can mount up in a hurry. The other thing that happened, reason why it works, is in the United States, they have what's called the Earned Income Credit. I don't know if you have that here. They're trying to get us poor people to work. Of course, we're not on welfare or anything like that. So the idea is if you are actually working and making some money, they want to thank you and pat you on the back. And so it depends how many children you have. The more kids, the more. You can make up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 of tax-free money that's added on to your income that you're not paying taxes on. And the other thing is, in the United States today, you folks all have, quote, free medical. I think you actually pay taxes for it. But where we are, we have a system now where if you make about $20,000 to $30,000, $35,000, the government pays all your premiums. You don't pay anything. And that's unheard of in the United States. So the secret is to make the cash income that's just below the threshold where the government comes after you like a fox. And if you come just below that, and then, the way we looked at it, we were wealthy when it came to water and firewood and food and fresh air and scenery and recreation and all the rest of it, and all the time we had and to be with our family and all the rest. So the money we needed was very limited. Now, maybe some people just couldn't live on that. Well, I mean, I think you've looked at our house. It's not too bad. And our car isn't too bad, but we never buy a new car. We always buy a car that's a few years old, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Questions with my mind. How many hours a day do you work? Do you,
So,
you've got it established now, but while you were establishing this, how many hours a day?
when we were building, I would work 10 to 12 hours a day in the summer. In the winter, you can't. And that's one thing about our life there. Winter is your vacation. It's 5 months. You can't hardly do anything outside. So we tried to get a project to the point where I could do inside work during that time. And this may sound strange, but virtually everything I do on that place to me is not work. It's my place. Yeah, I do what a guy would do who has a regular job does on Sunday. He mows the grass. He tinkers in the place, he plays with his bicycle, he works on the car. I mean, if you consider that work, then I'm working all the time, if you know what I mean. But typically, we eat 2 meals a day because we think that's healthier. I think it's way better. Linda likes it, she cooks less food, so that's what we do. So we eat around 9 or a little after that. Before that, except in the spring when I'm really trying to get things going and it's warmer, most of the year, from when we get up around 5, maybe 6, from that time till 9, I read and study. That's basically. And then when we eat, after that, I go out and do outside projects. If it's colder, like it is this time of year, I'll work in the greenhouses till about noon. By then, the sun's come up and it's warm, I work outside. And we eat again about 4. And after 4, in the spring again, when you're really trying to work, or harvest time, we may work some after supper. But often after supper, we don't. We just do other stuff. So that's my day. It's probably more like what's 10 to 4 is like 6 hours. But during that time, I'm mostly busy, just puttering around the place. But like Linda says, it's my sandbox. To me, most of it's not work. I enjoy it. But there is a certain, and very little of it is hard work. It's just what I'd call pleasant, outdoor, vigorous exercise. That's what it is. And you will be doing that. But if you didn't do that, you'd probably be in an office somewhere or whatever, working 8 hours a day plus a commute on either side. When we taught at school, we were more tired than we are now at the end of the day because of stress and mental exhaustion from trying to police 20 kids in a little classroom. Anyway, and we don't have a gym membership. And we don't have any gym equipment. Yeah. We'll go through real quick here. Anyway, potatoes, that's how we dry potatoes. This year we grew 1,400 pounds. That's our big calorie crop. And we sell a lot of them now. It takes about 200 pounds to reseed. We've had our own seed potatoes for decades. That's important. If you've ever tried to buy seed potatoes, they are loaded with pesticides and herbicides and everything. Carrots, we do the same thing. That's the potatoes in the root cellar. All those boxes above it, like those, are also full of potatoes. Each box holds about 33 pounds, so 3 boxes to the 100. These are apricots from the tree Linda was getting ready to can. Raspberries, she puts them on trays, puts them in the freezer, freezes them, you know how to do that. When they're solid, then you put them in the bags. This is our farmer's market. And you can see we do sell a lot of food. I mean, a lot of greens. Go through it quickly. We always have geraniums around. People love geraniums. There's raspberries. Those are figs in the foreground. Lots of squash, cucumbers, potatoes. Honey in the back. We encourage all of our neighbors, if they have any crafts, if they have any honey, if they have rhubarb, anything they want to bring to trade, sell, give away, they do that too. And which is good. And we have a lady who brings that. The other, is that nuts? What was that in the back? Do you know, Linda? I don't remember what she brings. She gets the honey locally. There's strawberries, peaches. I mean, really, when we started doing this, people were absolutely astounded that in this cold valley you could grow peaches like that and green beans. It's been a wonderful witness. Avocados, melons, pears, not avocados. Apricots, sorry, plums, and no. Our neighbor, who was an Adventist guy, tried bees there for 3 years. He had 15 hives. By the 3rd year, they were all dead. Now, if you feed them sugar water all winter, but that's, why do that? You might as well just buy honey. So it's too short of a flowering season for them to get enough resources. These are some of our neighbors that come. See her, that's the lady who actually does the honey, that's smelling the, I don't know, is it an apricot or whatever. They love the fruit. You know, it does my heart good to see people come and they're so delighted. And that's Linda talking to some of the others. Curtis, now that he's older, he and Mom and Grandma bake bread. And he started Curtis's Bread Corner at our thing. People love his bread. And it's $3 a loaf. I mean, they'll sell it for $7, $8, other people, but it's cheap. We're not in this for the money. It's there to draw people to natural living and to the Lord, to the Creator. But we sell about $1,000 a year, plus Curtis's. And he's learned to make his bread. This is some of the happy customers. This is Debo. See all the different stuff. She's an avid gardener herself, lives about 3 miles south of us, loves the farmer's market and gardening and all that. This is a high school group. It shows you your reputation gets around. This is from a high school 50 miles away. Somebody in town heard we had greenhouses. Word gets around. They wanted to build a greenhouse at this high school. Why don't our academies want to build greenhouses at their high schools? I wish they would. They built a $3 million greenhouse at this high school so the kids could have biology and all this sort of stuff in the wintertime. I could tell you a bunch of stories. Anyway, the teacher who did that got a hold of me. He said, I want to come out and look. He came out 3 times. He brought their engineering people out and everybody else and consulted and all that. And then finally, they built it. This is his outdoor recreation high school kids from the Whitefish High School. He wanted them to see that you can live in the wilderness and grow your own food. And so he brought them. They were going on a rafting trip later. To all that other food, these are huckleberries that grow in our valley. They are prolific, and the only people you have to worry about is grizzly bears. They love them. They eat lots of them, and we have not been as faithful. We have so much food now, but if we needed to, you could literally get gallons and gallons and gallons of those, and they're very, very tasty, full of nutrition, and you'd freeze them or dry them or whatever, can them. We've never made huckleberry juice, but you could. They make, and the best way to do them, this is Rochelle, I think, she just puts them in bags like that, throws them in the freezer. So they're really easy to deal with. I'll go through this fast. We try to keep all our own seed. Linda does a lot of that, dill seed, all the different kinds that we have, so that we're not dependent. This is her seed bank that we go from. We're learning a lot. Some things don't keep as well as others. The day is going to come when it's going to be hard to get seed. It was, I don't know if you noticed during COVID there for a while, it was hard to get seed. So, and this is how you keep tomato seed. We tried it, we read in books, you're supposed to take it out, let it foam and work a little bit, and then you wash it and dry it 3 days. I mean, it was like, it's going to take days, you know. We were over in the western part of Montana, farther from us, and we went to an Amish family. We had heard that had a greenhouse. It was a young lady, and we learned this trick from her because she grew a lot of their own food. In each one of those where you see Rutger and small cherry and large cherry and so on, you just take your best, ripest tomato, cherry or big one, whatever, and you take a slice just like you would for making a sandwich. And you get the really ripe one so you know the seeds are viable. You put down a 1/4 inch of dirt, you lay them all in there, and you cover them with another 1/4 inch of dirt. And you would think that would never work. It's all damp, and it all kind of gets a little bit moldy. And then when you're all done, you put them in the root cellar up on top of our jars near the ceiling. They just sit there for 5 months, 6 months. And they dry out completely. And then when you are ready, you take the tray down, and you put it in our furnace room and put 100-degree water on it, nice warm water. And in 4 or 5 days, you have hundreds of tomatoes coming up.
So I'm wondering, do you have like a resource place where you have all this information archived, like when someone can access it?
We're writing a book. People have asked us to for years. I hope it's of interest to people. It's about half done. And we're going to put all the stuff that we've learned and stuff we've learned from other people that we can, and hopefully it'll be a good resource for people. Anyway.
I didn't catch how you separate the seeds from the tomato.
You don't have to. That's the secret. You just put dirt over them and they grow fine. Now they grow in a big bunch, and we thought, well, they're growing, but how are you going to separate all those little plants without tangling all the roots up? When you're ready, they're all damp and everything, and they've gotten their first true leaves, and you're ready to transplant them into an individual pot, then what you do is you let them dry out, not to the point where they wilt, but nearly, and you just take up that glob and crumble a little bit, and they all just fall apart like grass seed, and you just plant them, and it's just... This lady was a genius. I don't know where she learned it, but you learn things from other people. We've learned lots from other people, and that's why folks, we need to network together. That's why we all need to be gardeners, big-time gardeners, not just because I know you all are wealthy. We don't have to do this. Like one of my neighbors said, well, Jerry, you're sure not doing this for the money. And I said, that's right. We're doing it for the health. We're doing it for our spiritual life. We're doing it for our soul. We're doing it to be in touch with the Creator. We're doing it as a witness. Someday, it'll come in really handy when you can't buy and sell. But that's not the reason you do it. Not the main reason. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted you to see that we didn't start with wonderful Okanagan ground. I don't know what yours is like here. The darker ground above is the ground that we have picked rocks for 30 years, added tons and tons of compost. We don't use artificial fertilizer on our food plants. And little by little, we built up a beautiful ground there. Underneath it, that tan-colored stuff, that's what the original soil looked like. It was rocky too, but smaller rocks. But just below that, that's what you have. Actually, it's not as bad as you think. Until when you get that soil built up, that soil is good drainage. And the last thing you want in a garden is hard pan clay under you, and everything sits in water. So rocks aren't all that bad. That's our compost pile, one of them. Probably half or more of that is black dirt from our spring bottoms. And I just threw this in here. This is Misty looking longingly into the orchard greenhouse. This is the first week of November. And when November comes, we harvest all the tomatoes that are left, including the green ones. They look kind of like that. And we'll have tomatoes. We put them in the root cellar, the ones that aren't ripe, and we have them till Christmas. And then we're devoid of tomatoes till May. Late May, we get our first tomatoes again. Anyway, we close that down in November. This is the same day, I think, we took this picture. This is the front of the solarium where it was snowing. It's winter. It's not built up much yet, but it's cold and snowy. And then I just stepped inside and took this picture. That's the difference. Greenhouses make all the difference in the world. You can see, however, this is November. Do you see the fig leaves? They're starting to turn yellow. The figs drop their leaves in December, and they're leafless for about 2 months. And in February, it starts to come out again. They do that in California, too.
What size is that solarium?
The solarium is 48 feet wide and 36 feet deep, but about a third of the back was for our school program. There's a bathroom there, shower room, and other rooms, closets and all that, and then our whole classroom and library around the other side I'll show in a minute. You wouldn't have to have that, although it does help with mass. But, you may have another family business you want to have it in. So your solarium could be half the size of this if you wanted. In the late fall, we haul in from the garden before it gets too cold all kinds of winter greens, but they were grown outside. You can see the kale there and see the green onions, the Swiss chard, that's beet greens, parsley, and you can have greens all winter. But they don't grow hardly at all. We transplant, we dig a whole shovel full, put it in the wheelbarrow, bring it in as a whole, so you disturb the roots as little as possible, and you put it in those grow beds. Of course, it's all mixed in with flowers, because we love flowers. That's our nemesis. That's a Columbia ground squirrel. Cute little guys, they are a digging machine. That's our other probably worst enemy. That's a grizzly bear. They dig under your fence. And they want one thing, carrots. They don't like cabbage. They don't like potatoes, fortunately, nothing. But they love carrots. So we're working on better electric fences for them and so on. But in the end, we've kind of resigned ourselves. They get the first 50 pounds. We get the rest. Because they can't eat more than about 50 pounds in one night. So when they've done that, and they always harvest them before they're really as sweet and big as they could have been. So it's hard to, we'll just pick them first. But once they pick them, we pick the rest. Then they come in 2 or 3 more nights to make sure that we didn't leave any, and they're disgusted, and they tear up a little more ground and whatnot, and then that's it for the year. This is a church group. We meet in our homes. This is a little bigger group because this was Curtis's baby dedication. That's in our living room, and you can see the snow outside. But, it's not unheard of for us to have a group like that. It might have been maybe more like 20, 30 there that day. This is another large group we often have in the fall because we have what we call a Waldensian Sabbath, and members from other churches come and help. This is one of our other members, the ones that have the rental cabins. They don't use this place in the winter, though. And that's Linda and Karina getting ready for a potluck. Linda was talking about, you can see all the pots and all the casseroles. And this is just like you have here, only a smaller scale, obviously. This is a church group. This is a more typical sized church group. This is in the early summer over in Glacier National Park, just across the river from our place. We also have caves in the area, and we have one Sabbath a year we go in the caves and have our Waldensian Sabbath, where we honor the Waldensian people who copied a lot of scripture in caves just like that. It was good for the young people to see what their salvation cost. I told you we cover the pool sometimes. This was a baptism that we had. We have the baptism in the hot tub. I heat it up to about 90 degrees with wood. And then the people, will have maybe 50 people in there. And then the door that you see to the left and the window there, that's our classroom. That's what it looked like in our classroom. It's where I did the tutoring. And this was a school group, one of our school groups. All those kids are grown now, through college. There's 2 or 3 doctors there, nurse practitioners, a couple that did overseas youth work and restoration work. The guy on the left with a cat, he runs a masonry business with his dad in Upper Peninsula. The next guy runs his own well business, well repair business here in Washington, just south of you here, and so forth. That's our gymnasium, and that's atop that biggest mountain you saw. I've ended up climbing that mountain 13 times because the kids always wanted to go up it, new kids. And Ted and Rochelle, when they came back and were in the area, they would help with the students the last few years. This is up in Glacier Park on a back. And I'll tell you, it was a bonding experience to be on top of a big mountain with one of your students. It really was. It's a little work to get there. We had a work program. We did all kinds of things. They learned to pour concrete. This is Linda helping with that. We're pouring a little ceiling on a family memorial building, all concrete. They learned lessons there, and this is doing a mission trip in the Navajo Reservation where we were helping build a lifestyle center. This is a typical graduation when it was too cold outside. This was our only senior that year. He was a tall, handsome young man, 6'4", I think. That's his mom and dad on the front row, and the pool's covered again. No matter how many graduates we had, it wasn't just the president of the class that gave a speech. They all gave a speech. It was important. And we emphasized great music whenever we could. He gave us pictures. He was quite a photographer. That was his class gift to us. That was our last graduation outside. We had 5 graduates because the 2 on the left were actually homeschoolers from another Adventist family in the area. The 3 boys were from our school. And I just wanted to show you a little bit. That's our precious little Rochelle. And we actually look a little younger there. She was 6 months old when we moved to the place, and she lived there for 19 years. That's all she knew. I mean, we traveled mission trips around the world and all of that, but we were there, as I mentioned before. That's little Rochelle on Daddy's back when I had my beard. That was her playhouse, and this is building it. She helped build her own little house. She was so proud of that little place. We milled some of the lumber by hand, bought some, but it cost us $200 to build the whole thing. It's the best $200 you'll ever spend. Every little girl needs a place like this. That's inside. She was meticulously clean. Had running water, had electricity, had a little stove to cook, and she'd have Mom and Dad for supper once in a while. Had her friends over. The girls would have sleepovers. She had her own little fountain that was heart-shaped. And across you see the powerhouse over the pond. This is some of her friends. The one on the right girl was one of our students. The other 2 were never students, but they did come to church some. But the big thing, can you see what Rochelle is holding? And that's a Canada goose. I could tell you a whole story on that. I won't, but she found it in the water in a tiny little fluff ball. Didn't even know what it was. She raised it till she taught it to fly and all the rest. That's Taffers. She had such a heart for things. That's why she became a doctor, I think, is any little while she found that little guy, his mother had been killed or whatever, it was a little snowshoe rabbit. We went on all kinds of recreational trips like this, is building snow caves in the winter. And we encouraged her, I think wasn't she 9 years old? We told her, you really should start your own business. We wanted to teach her to be an entrepreneur, to run her own business, manage money and all that. Dad, I can't do that. Yes, you can. So we had heard that some of the florist shops in town, 50 miles away, liked little baskets and things like this that they could put flowers in to sell. So she started making baskets. Pretty soon she was making hundreds of them. In the end, she made roughly $20,000 in her college fund before she ended up going to college, and learned incredible skills for managing money and all the rest of it. That's one of her wreaths. That was one just like that was in a bank for years and years in town. She made furniture like that too. She also became a great mason. This is her doing a stone gateway for a neighbor. And we'd go on mission trips with them. This is in Nepal. We went to Shir Memorial and spent quite a while over there, several weeks. This is another trip we went to Europe. This is in Corinth. This is the old Corinth, the real Corinth, where Paul spoke. Modern Corinth isn't anything like it. And she finally graduated. I'm holding her 2 tassels there because she graduated with all A's. Of course, people say, well, your daddy gave them to you. She earned them. She earned them. She was a wonderful student. And both of us are shedding tears there, I think you can see. And then she went to CUC here in Canada, I told some of you, now Berman. And from there to Loma Linda, met Ted, and that's at their graduation from med school. And this is their marriage in the solarium. It was supposed to be all outside. It all was, except just when the ceremony was supposed to start, it started to rain. And we kind of had a deal where we covered the pools real quick. We all ran in there. There were 220 people in the solarium, including an orchestra, because Ted was in an orchestra as a young man, and 15 of those came to be at his wedding. Soon as the ceremony kind of got over, came out, the sun all came out, and the whole reception was outside. Those girls on the left there, and the first guy on the right are all from Canada, because Rochelle's friends were from college here. That's her being pushed by her new husband on her childhood swing. We did lots and lots of hiking, mountain climbing together. It's one of the best things we ever did. Do lots of that with your children. Canoeing the river. This is the river, runs right down our valley past her place. That's Rochelle with a bunch of her friends. Our place is just back from the right there. Mountain climbing. And since they've come, again, Ted's genius, he's put in a rope tow on our hill. We always had a ski hill, but the kids had to hike up, or I hauled them up in my pickup. Now, you can do this. And our pond, that's Rochelle's Island in the background, the left there, but the far pond I was telling you makes an ice skating pond because it's far enough away from the hydro plant that it freezes. And we try to keep that going, and she has friends that come over.
Sorry, did you tell everyone, I didn't catch the whole date. Is this somewhere in the Rockies? What valley is that?
This is in the North Fork Valley on the western edge of Glacier National Park. If you look on a map later, you find the western part, northwestern section. Look for Kalispell, Columbia Falls, Whitefish, and there's a little valley going up by Glacier Park.
I've heard Whitefish is really big for skiing.
It's a ski resort. It's not, only about 5,000 people live there, but ice skating, again, it takes work to keep a place like that up. But kids love it. So do the dogs. This is them in Nicaragua doing a mission trip where we had one of our former students using their med skills there. And this is little Rochelle. She thought Daddy could do anything. I really couldn't, but she thought so. And she learned a lot of building skills with us. And now this is she and Ted and Curtis, and this is the home that they built on top of the hill. They did all the landscaping first, all the site prep and all the surveying and all of that. We got that's getting rock. Like I told you, they won't let you use a tractor, so it uses muscles to get stone out. And this is getting some big ones for the fireplace. This is building the house. I'll go through quick. They have a heated slab using tubing. It does take a little electricity. They're on solar to pump the water around. but they don't have they have very little basement. They used a timber frame company for the basic frame. We did about half of all the work on it. And that's Rochelle working on some of the stairway going up. They put in a wood furnace. And if you ever want to get some, these really work. It's a core that you put in, and then you stone all around it. And that's putting some of the hearth rock on it. And you can see it's up there. It has channels in it. The smoke goes up and down like this, so it heats the whole mass. It heats a lot of house. That's Rochelle doing the work. That's in their bedroom. That's putting the last rock in. That's what it looks like today. And it's two-sided, and there's another fireplace outside, too. And this is her country kitchen. See the stove at the end? It's the same as ours. But they have the dual system. There's a propane stove there, too. But it's all spring water for the water and all the rest of it. And they put in a really long table because we often have a lot of people there for potlucks. And that's out there, the mountains out there front. This is their spring. It's like 400 or 500 feet from their house. Goes down to that high lifter I told you about. Back up, clear to the top, without any pump or anything. Fills that 1,700-gallon tank, which we buried. You see the sand there and then the big piles of dirt. So it won't freeze. There's their solar cells. And this is little Curtis. I love this picture. Look at him. Daddy can do anything. Look at those eyes. He grew up thinking everybody builds your own house because that's all he knew from the time he got old enough to even be cognizant we were building on their house. And he loves screw guns and saws and everything, you know, all that sort of stuff. And he likes Papa's hat, and we're so lucky that they live a quarter mile from us on the same property. We can help in his spiritual training. We watch him a lot. I can't really, that's a blessing that you don't always get, and we're thankful for it. Just some of the wildlife. This is right out the kitchen window. This is a black bear that Chloe treed. They're good at treeing bears. See the other one? This is taken out the living room window, and Chloe's got the bear up there. See the light-colored bark? That's where he scratched the bark off the tree. It's amazing they can climb a tree like that and weigh 200 or 300 pounds. Grizzlies can't climb because they have too long of claws and they can't hold. That's grizzlies in the front yard. Lots of deer. This is another grizzly, at the neighbor's house. Ted took this picture down by their whitefish home when they still had a home there. The two dogs treed this mountain lion. Wolves, moose, all the wildlife in there. You have much of this wildlife here too. Spend time out acquainting your kids with all that's out there. Elk on the way to town, fox, even pine marten. And I know that Vancouver and Seattle have their skyscrapers, right? Well, Montana has ours too. I think ours are prettier. This is out our front window. The Lord's promised us He will help us. I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. We'd love to live with you in heaven someday.
Thank you very much. When I was going through all that, I'm going, this can't be on earth. It looked too darn good. So that's definitely paradise, heaven on earth, as they say, right? And it took a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of prayer to God to be able to build up something like that. What we wanted to do also is to give you some offerings for what you've done for us. We appreciated it. And yes, we hope that you come up here one day and again, and we look forward to your book. So,
good. Well, thank you all
right
for your
Maybe I'll just close with prayer and then, Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for a beautiful Sabbath. Thank you for the presentation this evening, and please be with us throughout the week. Please give us strength, give us peace of mind, and just guide us in whatever we do and wherever we go. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful day and for everything you do for us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.